Intentional Currency podcast. My name is Yasmin. I'm the founder of the Intentional Currency, and our mission is to help Muslim women take control of their money, build wealth in a way that's pleasing to Allah, and feel confident making financial decisions that serve their families and their communities. In this podcast, we're bringing you real conversations from some incredible women who share our mission. These women are leaders, change makers, and financial literacy advocates from around the world. Together, we'll explore what it means to create wealth that's rooted in faith and designed to have a positive impact. Each guest brings their own journey, their struggles, their wins, whether it's setting up an emergency fund, learning how to invest, or figuring out how to manage finance and family. Our hope is that their stories inspire you, empower you, and remind you that financial empowerment is for every Muslim woman who wants it. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get into the conversation. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Intentional Currency podcast. I am so excited to have a very special guest today. I'm very excited for everything that you're going to share with us. It's been a pleasure having you in the Wealth Circle. And so I'm happy to introduce Emin. Welcome to the podcast. And how's it going?
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So excited to be here today with you, Yasmin. Alhamdulillah, doing well on my end.
Alhamdulillah. So you have a super interesting background. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about your background and how you got into this area of financial literacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So like Yasmin mentioned, my name is Emin, and I'm a public health professional by background, and I currently work as a policy analyst. And a lot of my background actually comes from an interest in community engagement, community mobilization, and really working towards building programs and policies that are equitable and that support and uplift the communities and societies that we live in to have better health outcomes. So just kind of by professional background, I did undergraduate studies within health sciences. And then in the final years of my undergraduate studies, I realized that I had a really strong interest in global health, public health, really understanding the social determinants of health and how they impact our health and well-being. And that's kind of what led me to then go on and pursue a master's of public health. And it's interesting because within kind of that professional work, I was doing a lot of work on the side within the communities that I was a part of. So whether those were student life spaces, whether that was within the Muslim community that I had locally at home, just kind of any space that felt like it resonated with me and my identity in the areas that I was interested in. And all of that kind of led me towards being really passionate about community empowerment, community engagement, mentorship, particularly for women. And I think without even realizing, especially in these past few years, a lot of my work in the spaces that I was in was leading me towards financial education, financial management, financial literacy. And actually a lot of the spaces that I was in with, whether it was again, personally with friends or with the communities that I was working in, I was seeing this common thread of folks just kind of feeling intimidated, and overwhelmed and kind of shying away from wanting to learn more about financial management. And these were people who, mashallah, were, are all so bright, or all so passionate, or all so confident, but it's just something with the space just felt so daunting. And it felt the same way for me, honestly. And then I think all of those pieces came together for me to be like, wait a second, I feel like there's something we can do about this. And if so many of us feel this way, I feel like there's a way that we can, come together and learn more and just feel a little bit more confident and inspired. And I think that's when the puzzle pieces kind of started to fit. And I was like, wait, I want to learn more. I want to feel more confident in this space. And because a lot of the work that I was doing was based around community education and mentorship and mobilization, I felt like it was kind of like my responsibility, not even just for myself, but for everyone around me. And I wanted to share that information with others. So that's kind of what led me to be like, wait a second, some of the stuff is starting to make sense and it's coming together and the pieces are fitting. And that's what kind of kickstarted my journey, I would say.
I love that. And like something I find so beautiful about your journey is that ultimately finances and health are so connected, and people don't like to talk about it. We like to kind of pinpoint like the illness or the symptoms without realizing that if we all had financial security, our health situation would look completely different.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to ask you, because we're Muslim women, how do you feel like being a Muslim woman affects the way that you manage your finances?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And, subhanAllah, I feel like the identity as a Muslim woman seeps into every part of my being. And I feel like we can all relate to this, where just in how I show up in my values and my goals, like things like accountability and integrity and community. I think so many of those values are inherently rooted in being a Muslim woman. So I think it kind of felt like a natural extension in how I decided I wanted to go about financial management, and firstly, even understanding it and educating myself on it. I feel like generally, and I think I'll kind of speak to this later on too, but I felt even at the beginning when I was starting to learn, it felt like there wasn't enough representation in the space. And I think that's what made me shy away from it for so long, because I was like, wait a second, if I want to go about this in the way that I do, and that started with an intention, with the intention that I wanted to learn from those that looked like me, and rooted in the values that I had that our Deen tells us about, wealth and barakah and blessing. I was like, wait, I want to start this off on that note. And because I felt like there was that gap in representation and in spaces where this was talked about or even normalized, I was hesitant for so long. But I think, alhamdulillah, being able to find those spaces now and being able to have more of those conversations, and just feeling more confident in it, and knowing that, hey, there is a way for me to learn about this that aligns with my faith and my values, it just, again, makes you so much more confident. And that peace and ease, I think, is the biggest thing, where you feel comfortable in what you're doing. Because I felt like, again, there was that disconnect where just the spaces that I knew of, they just, something felt misaligned. And I think a lot of that had to do with just my identity as a Muslim woman.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think especially when it comes to the conversation of money, outside of a spiritual context, it becomes all about profit. And I think for a lot of Muslim women, we just don't relate to that. And we don't relate to that materialistic sort of idea of collecting more and more, because for us, we have a higher purpose. And there aren't a lot of people who are having that conversation of how can we use this money and manage it in a way where it's actually connecting to our higher purpose and growing our impact. And so I think, exactly as you said, it's about having more representation, normalizing these conversations, changing the narrative for the next generation of women. So it's normal to have high ambitions that are financially connected and also serve a higher purpose.
Exactly. I think you nailed it with that piece too. Like, I think with so many of the things that I do in life, like my purpose is kind of my like guiding light. And again, so much of our purpose as Muslim women is connected to the faith and our deen, and how we can show up in spaces carrying that with confidence and certainty. And I think, again, like having that connection to the purpose makes everything feel so much more special in how you do it. And again, intentional in how you do it, which I think is so, so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something special about being able to have these conversations in our generation, because a lot of us grew up with, realistically, parents and especially mothers who felt so differently about finances and who had very different mindsets when it comes to money, and perhaps didn't have the language to be able to talk about finances in this way. And ultimately, I think it's beautiful that we're able to bring this back to Islam and take out those cultural influences that may have been limiting for women in the past. So I was wondering if maybe you had anything you wanted to add to that in terms of like culturally, if there's any experiences you had in regards to money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely many misconceptions, I think, around the topic of finances. And I think definitely that kind of gendered approach to it set me back for sure, because I think on top of the space, again, being kind of daunting, I think there's kind of this narrative that like, oh, it's okay. Like, I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to think about it. I'll leave that to the male figures in my life. And I think that was really limiting for so long, because alhamdulillah, I feel like as someone who really values knowledge, like I think knowledge is power, and I feel so grateful. And I even the privilege to be able to learn and know, like you were saying, is so special to me. So then to feel like there was almost a roadblock for some reason to learn about this space, it's like now looking back in hindsight, I'm like, wow, like I didn't realize how limiting that was for so long, and how you can stay in that cycle for forever, right? And not even realize. And I think, again, when I speak to my friends, when I speak to the spaces I'm in, I think this is just a repetitive cycle. And so many people experience this, and you kind of just think like, okay, I guess I'll just never learn. I'll never know, or kind of leave it to someone else. But that takes away from your autonomy, right? And that takes away from you feeling confident and even understanding the space, or feeling like you have a seat at the table, because we're taught that we don't.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. And I think that we downplay our role financially, right? I think that a lot of us were told this narrative that your husband's wealth is your wealth. Your husband's going to take care of all of your expenses. And so for a lot of us, we really took a back seat and just said, okay, this is a space where I don't have to go and find out how to manage my finances. And it's such a shame because we happen to live in a very capitalist society. And ultimately, taking a back seat financially has also sort of lowered our voices on a global scale. And so I think it's so important for us to kind of spread that message of understand finance, not even if you don't have necessarily that role in your family, just to give yourself that voice.
Exactly. And that means everything, right? Like being able to even have that understanding and that voice, like, Masha, like when I think about all the women around me, like everyone is so brilliant and wonderful. And we all have our own unique journeys and perspectives and lived experiences that that have such a value to, I think, how we show up and what we contribute. And that's no different when speaking about financial management. And I think even again, having the ability to know and learn means that we can live lives more in alignment with who we are and work towards our aspirations and our goals in a way where it just again feels more aligned to us and we're not restricted in a box or kind of left in the dark.
Absolutely. And I love that. Like having the knowledge to ensure that your finances are in alignment with your beliefs is so incredibly powerful, especially in a world today where politically there is so much happening. And we want to be in a position where our principles and our values, we're able to express that financially in our savings and in our wealth. We're able to have those difficult conversations with our wealth managers, with the bank, and to say, I am taking my money out of this mutual fund, or I'm taking my money out of this stock because I don't believe in the ethics of this company. And that in itself is so powerful.
Exactly. That like ethical decision making, right? Like having it be tied to finances, which is again like a whole can of worms in and of itself, and so much to learn and so much to know and educate yourself on. But at least taking the steps to get there and know is so much more powerful than again not knowing.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of touched on it, but what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about finance in our community as Muslim women?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we definitely touched on a big one. I think kind of that like gendered bias to approaching it, I would say. And I feel like generally with finances, again, I think where I struggled, I would say a lot is that there's this misconception that it's such a complex area. There's certain financial jargon and technical terms and ways of doing it that, if you don't know it, then you won't know it. So it's almost like this uninviting space in a way, right? Where you kind of feel like, okay, I feel like I've been told that this is very difficult and challenging. And I think anyone hearing that, and especially if, again, you're not really seeing representation around you or the people in your life aren't talking about it, I think you almost start to just believe it and think that you're not capable of knowing or learning. So you just kind of stop there. So I think that misconception lends to again shying away from the topic, not really having conversations about it, not even asking questions, right? Because you almost feel like this isn't your space to be in, or this isn't your topic to ask about or question or anything like that. And again, I feel like I see this so much in the people around me and the conversations that I've had, where in reality, and I think it has so much more to do with like the resources that we have around us, and honestly lack thereof, which I think leads to a lot of those misconceptions, and the communities to be able to have these conversations. I think that's like that missing gap. But I definitely think just the overall narrative around financial management, financial literacy, and education is that it's complex, it's difficult, it's challenging. So then naturally, it's okay. This is not an area I need to worry about, or one day I'll learn, or oh, it's okay. What's another whatever amount of years or whatever it looks like. But in reality, they do very much add up. And when you look back, I think just like any skill or topic area that you're not familiar with in life, it's like baby steps, right? It's just like starting small. And then you go from there. But I think that like starting is the hardest part. So those misconceptions stop you from even starting.
That's so true. And I think that most people can relate to that, right? Is that they've been putting this off. It's been on their, New Year's resolutions for years. And they just never get to opening that investment account or sitting down with their budget. I wanted to ask you, in your own journey, like, is there a moment where it clicked for you and you realized, oh, I can actually manage my own finances?
Yeah. You know what? It's so funny because I think, again, alhamdulillah, I feel like I'm so grateful and privileged for the fact that I have this passion within me to learn. I think it's just like a lifelong interest I've had where I just want to soak up knowledge and I want to learn, and I want to know as much as I can. And it's funny because I almost feel like the idea of finances was so built up in my head to be something that it wasn't, that like I actually particularly remember one conversation that I had with a friend, and after this friend was someone who has a lot of knowledge. And again, it just started out of an area of interest and wanting to learn more. And I think just seeing the passion in their eyes about it, talking about it, and just seeing the shift in their energy towards it, it almost gave me that light bulb moment where I was like, wait a second, like all it takes is just like that one YouTube video or that one book to kind of start to dispel some of those myths and beliefs. And I feel like that took this area that again felt so daunting and scary and overwhelming into something where I actually started feeling empowered and excited. And it was just like that mindset shift. And again, I think who you surround yourself with is so important. So for me, it was very much just being around someone who knew so much, and it kind of like rubbed off on me and made me feel really excited and like, you know what? I actually am just going to watch this one video and start from somewhere, and it'll lead me to some sort of Google search or research that I do into like a domino effect. And that's exactly what it did.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. You know what? I feel like that's such a common idea of finance, is that it's this very big, complex thing. And when you have someone who can break it down and just say, yeah, of course you can invest. It's easy. Just open the account, buy your first stock, and that's it. You're good to go. It makes things so much easier. So as Muslim women, I think that there are some components of financial literacy that are similar, right? So budgeting and emergency funds and retirement, but there's also kind of a component that we touched on, which is your intention. And I kind of wanted to go a bit deeper because I feel like that's something that a lot of people who watch this are going to relate to. So I wanted to ask you, what role do you think barakah plays in the way that you manage your finances?
Yeah, such a beautiful question, because I really think like how barakah shows up in your life, and how it starts with your intention. When you see it unfold, it's so beautiful. And I really think like starting everything off with an intention helps so much, because it's your why, right? Like, why am I doing this? And I think having that intention, especially when it's rooted within, values that we have as Muslims, it's so special because you see everything connect, and it's like everything starts to make sense in the grand scheme of life. And again, I think especially with financial management, when you have that intention, subhanAllah, it just, the barakah just comes in, when you have those, again, values that are rooted in integrity and honesty and so much about community, right? Like giving back to people and using what we've been given to support others. And I think the idea of wealth in and of itself is a blessing, and I do think that with wealth, it's like all of our responsibility to be mindful of how we're using it and what we're using it towards, even ethically, sustainably, like what we're doing with our money, and always carrying, gratitude in that. And I think that reminder is so helpful, because sometimes you can get lost in other things and forget that wealth in and of itself is such a blessing. And I think, again, I carry so much responsibility within myself and what I do with that, because I really think that is indicative of the kind of person that I am and the kind of life that I want to live in alignment with my values and in what I do with that blessing, right?
I think that is such a beautiful point, because in some ways, recognizing that your wealth is a responsibility helps you to actually detach from the amount of money that you have. Because in our society, as we know, the first question that everybody asks is, what do you do for a living? People check what car you're driving, people check what house you have, and they kind of measure you up based on how much money you have. And it's very hard as people who are living in this society to detach from that and to recognize that actually the amount that we have is very much a responsibility. And it has nothing to do with our own sort of capacity or how smart we are or those sorts of things. It very much has to do with how much Allah is trusting us with this wealth to use this money for good. Do you have any sort of experience seeing how that financial literacy can sort of empower communities when it comes to our health?
Yeah, I think genuinely, like the idea of, I think particularly when it comes to stress and how that manifests, it's like naturally there's physical aspects of it, but the mental and emotional toll that it can take as well, it's so much larger than we could think. And I think naturally we know that having, stability when it comes to finances is a strong enabler of just, feeling more of that wellness, of being able to, again, pour into yourself, your family, your community, those around you. But I think sometimes when there's that missing component of not having the education on it, like I think it can be a very slippery slope, where, maybe you need to take certain steps or measures in the moment that are actually very harmful in the long run. And I think that's the unfortunate piece where I think sometimes the intention is good, but it's just without that education or that knowledge, sometimes it can unfold into a bigger problem down the road for yourself, for your family, for the generations around you. So I really do think it's like it's tricky, but I think sometimes being able to pause and put time today will do so much more help, like justice and help and support in the long run.
That's such a great point. The point of community. And I think that's exactly how we are going to be able to heal and to grow ultimately is by sharing our own experiences. So I think a lot of women are going to relate to everything you just said about feeling like they're up against a wall, that they don't understand the options that exist. They're really worried about getting into something that touches interest. They're overwhelmed with work, maybe kids, life, right? What do you think is the first step? What advice would you give to a woman who feels like that?
Yeah. First, I just want to give her like a big hug, the hypothetical woman, because again, it's so challenging, right? And it can consume at you and eat at you. And it's so hard when you have these sincere intentions, but sometimes they don't play out the way that you want because you do feel stuck. And I think I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I really do think it's about like starting small. And again, we've mentioned this so many times. It's the name of the work that you do, but starting off again with like stepping back, setting that intention of why you're doing this, what you want to learn, how will this support you, how will it impact you, and then starting small. So I think even something as simple as like for a month, like tracking, like okay, hey, like where am I spending, and what are my expenses, and then what is my income, and even just tracking and kind of having that awareness already helps so much because you don't feel as in the dark anymore. Like you almost can start to like look visually. I'm a visual person, so I really like to almost like lay it out in front of me and see what I have. And then that can at least set you like in a bit of a foundation, right? To figure out what your top 2, 3 goals are, and where you can kind of go from here. So I think even just having that sense of like laying out the foundation and basics, and again, it's just a matter of like tracking as the first step. And then from there, it's about setting those goals. And then I emphasize the value of community so much because, again, a lot of the times we don't have the tools, the education, the resources to know what to do from there or what my next steps could even look like. So I think being able to go to someone trusted around you, whether, again, that's an advisor, a family member, spaces like these that we're really hoping to build up for women. And I think being able to have those conversations. So many times, maybe people are asking the same questions that you are. They've already asked them. There's people in the same boat as you. I think that idea of you're not in it alone can take away so much of that mental burden and stress that you feel when your back is up against the wall, because there's power in numbers too, and feeling like it's not just you in it, but you're with people who want the best for you, who want to support you through your journey. We're all on this journey together, towards gaining education, gaining knowledge. I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And I think that can really help take some of that, again, mental toll away. And then you start plugging together the pieces of like a plan for you, and everyone's financial journey is so unique and different. And I think it's just about feeling like a little bit more like you understand what yours looks like, and then you can take those actionable steps from there. But I really think, again, starting at the basics, starting off with like one manageable task. And again, if that looks like, I think it's amazing to be able to just track your expenses, track your income for a month and just see where you're at. That is a great starting place to kind of go from there.
Absolutely. That's a perfect step-by-step guide, actually. And I think you mentioned something that's so important, which is all of a sudden, once you see all of your expenses in front of you, you no longer feel in the dark.
100%. Maybe this is actually a beautiful place to mention this because I don't even think I've told you this in the time that we've chatted. But actually, last year Ramadan, one of my duas was around having a community around financial education and literacy, and just learning more about it for myself and feeling more comfortable in the space. And I felt like I was starting to want to learn more, but then do something with it. And then, subhanAllah, I met you. So I really do feel like being in this space is like a answered dua for me. And I think the power of dua is so beautiful. And you don't even know what's behind a door that you might think is closed. Like you don't know what's waiting there for you. So I just needed to mention that because I think, subhanAllah, it's so beautiful to have these beautiful intentions that we have in our heart, or wishes of things that we, want to see for ourselves in our lives that align with what we think our values are and our purpose. And you don't know, again, what's waiting there for you. So just needed to mention that.
SubhanAllah, it's so incredibly true. And I'm so happy. It's been such a blessing getting to know you over these last couple of months, alhamdulillah. And I think that that's another thing, is the women who watch, who are part of this community. As soon as you know, as soon as you learn something, as soon as you get through your budget, share it with another woman. Like, empower another woman. Have the conversation when your friends are over and say, hey guys, like, let's talk about this. Have you guys used this budgeting app? Does anybody? And those little moments where we're normalizing these conversations is what's going to ultimately lift our entire community. And so I think it's so beautiful that the second that you really understood that this was something that was important to you, your first instinct was, not only do I want to learn a little bit more, but I also want to use it to teach our community. So I did want to ask you, before I let you go, are there any stories, or was there anything that you wanted to mention that we didn't get the chance to talk about?
Something that I was just going to mention that's so funny. It's like, I don't know if it's like one of those situations where, when you're like thinking about, you want to buy a certain car, and then you start seeing that car like everywhere on the road. I felt like as soon as I started having this passion and interest in gaining financial literacy and education, so many of the spaces that I was in, it was being brought up. Like, one of the community groups that I was a part of actually recently, they were talking about wanting to do like a workshop for Muslim women on financial literacy, for example. And I was like, wow, we've never mentioned this before. And it got brought up there. And then even amongst friends, I feel like I've been hearing more from people just on their own, just mentioning like, oh, I saw this book, or I just picked it up and I was like, you know what, I want to learn more about it. And it's just so incredible how, like, once you start to get more comfortable in a space, and maybe it's about my own confidence, right? Like, once I started feeling more confident and empowered to speak up and talk about it, it's like it was like reflected right back at me with like the people that I was around or the spaces that I was in. And even if people weren't familiar, it's like, I feel like they themselves then took it and they were like, wait, I kind of want to learn more. I kind of want to know more.
It's so beautiful. Emin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing all of your experience and knowledge with us. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. And I know that we'll speak again very soon, inshallah. Have an amazing evening.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Yasmin. This was incredible. And yeah, I just appreciate you so much, and being able to have such meaningful and powerful conversations. It's so special, and it means so much to me, and inshallah, many more to come.
Inshallah. Thank you so much.